morning, Mr. Paramasivam Mahalingam, Director, Citibank India, and everybody present here. I am Dr. K.G. Hemalata, Professor and Head of the Department, Dayal South College of Engineering. I welcome you all to C.K. Prahalad Lecture Series. C.K. Prahalad Lecture Series is an interaction with industry leaders and intellectuals across the industry segments to share their experience of being lead businesses. The theme of today's event is international banking. International banking is a key component of the global economy. Multinational corporations need many special banking services such as foreign currency exchange and funding for overseas investments. International banking provides those financial services to clients, both institutional and individual, located in many different countries. This encompasses a wide range of activities, including transaction with foreigners and domestic residents relating to deposits and lending in domestic and foreign currencies, facilitating foreign currency transactions and foreign exchange risk hedging, participating in international loan syndications, and facilitating international trade, finance for clients, etc. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce you all to Mr. Paramasivam Mahalingam, as a part of C.K. Prahalad Lecture Series conducted by Department of Management Studies, Dayananda Sagar College of Engineering, Bangalore. Mr. Paramasivam Mahalingam is currently the Director at Citibank India, with 20 years of experience in various segments of banking and broadly spent equal time handling clients in retail, small and medium enterprises, and international banking segments over the past 20 years. He's working with a lot of global companies with a wide exposure to different industries across the globe. He has developed a fair understanding of various nuances in business development, relationship management, product risk management, operational risk, etc., across various business segments. With more than 2 decades of experience in the corporate banking space, he is defined as a person with passion, willingness to learn, and diligence are some of the key traits that he believes reflects him as an individual. Welcome, Mr. Paramasivam. I hand over the session to our student executive, Ms. Srinidhi and Ms. Shristi. Hand over to you girls.
Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Emma.
Good morning, sir. I'm Srinidhi Hegde, MBA student from the Department of Management Studies. Sir, to begin with, you completed your MBA from Madurai Kamraj University and you were very active in all the student development activities. Looking back now, can you please tell us how important were those days in shaping your personality?
I saw the questions which Hema had shared on WhatsApp some time back. This is a great question because the way I was still my undergraduation, and the first time I entered a hostel was during my post-graduation. And I would rather say that that was actually a defining moment in the way my personality changed over a period of time. Because what happens is that the moment you are at the helms of your parents, okay, the way you are being brought up or whatsoever, that's very different. But then the moment you get into a hostel, and we were part of something called a residential course, which means that you may have to pretty much run all the hostel-related activities, your departmental activities. That will entail a lot of kiddish student level politics and all of those tricky funds, okay, which we used to have, okay, the elections, all of those things, right? So if I look back at all of those things, right, we were almost like 60 or 70 people, okay, all of us were together. You will like an idli, somebody will not like an idli, but you will have to still live along, right? Take a consensus decision. I think a teamwork and the preparedness for working as a team coexist was born there. That's what I would believe. It's a very defining moment in my career. I was involved pretty much in some of the activities at the student forums and all of that, right? At that stage, you will have a lot of shyness, okay? You may not have a lot of confidence, but slowly as you're coexisting with 15 and other people, you will slowly start exhibiting a little more confidence, okay? And that when you come to a workforce, okay, to a regular workforce, you will continue with some of those traits. So my piece of advice for the students in the first year or second year of MBA is to just get more involved, okay, with your colleagues, understand their perspectives, okay, try and take a decision for a common cause, those are going to be very important as you progress in your career. If I have to say, people who were not as much as involved, okay, in student level activities or some of the forums, etc. Okay, so they had to actually struggle in the initial phase, but eventually all of us made up. Okay, so that's what my answer would be for that particular point. It is extremely important, okay, for a long-term career growth.
Good morning, sir. My name is Srishti Agarwal, and I am a student from MBA BTU Danan Sagar College of Engineering. My question to you, sir, is after MBA, making career choices sometimes seem to be a very daunting task for a fresh MBA graduate. Please share with us some of your experiences on how you made the career choices to start your journey after MBA.
This could be a joke, okay, because when some of my professor in the first year asked me, okay, what do you want to do? I mean, that's a typical cliched question when every professor will ask. I still remember I just went and said, I want to become a CEO of a bank, and he laughed. Okay, and that's how it started. I always wanted to be in a bank. I wanted to grow in an international bank. Okay, I think I had some kind of clarity around those things. Where, how, when did I get this thought? I really don't understand that. But banking is something which I always wanted to do. And again, there was, the way, if I think about it, I always thought a bank job is like you go to an office at 9 o'clock and come back by 3:34. That was the only thought I had, because you don't have to take a lot of effort, okay? But when I came into banking, I understood that it is not that simple. So I initially, when I finished MBA, I was very keen to start my career something related to the financial services industry. So I joined a small NBFC, and then I was just staying there for like 7-8 months. Even when I was joining the NBFC, when the MD of that company asked, what do you want to do? I kept on telling him that I want to move into a bank at some stage, and that to an international bank. And then I joined HDFC. It was an Indian private sector bank. I stayed there for like 6.5 years. The career growth was really fast in HDFC Bank, because 99, the Indian banking sector had opened up. The opportunities were immense. Okay, at least people like us, like Hema and all of us, when we finished college, the liberalization in 91, 92 was actually taking into effect in terms of offering employment to the new fresh graduates, etc. And then I joined HDFC, 6 years. You won't believe, first year I joined as an executive. And in 6 years, I was almost heading Karnataka, the loan underwriting and all of that, which means that I was signing off loans for the bank sitting in Bangalore. I used to extensively travel to all parts of Karnataka, like Hubli, Davangere, Mysore, Mangalore, all of these markets. It was such a fun. You will have a large team reporting into you, and you will be 25 at that age. It's a great thing. But still, I always wanted to move to an international bank. I didn't know why. But around 6.5 years later, when the career was very promising, also I went to my boss and said, look, I've got an offer from Citibank and I want to go. And he kept on asking me that you've grown well, so why do you want to move at this point of time? Somewhere I wanted to have an international exposure and all of that. One of my bosses finally agreed that you should go, with a warning saying that multinational banks are places where they will just hire and fire you because the pressure is going to be very high and all of that. It indeed was the case. The first 1 year in Citibank was a struggle, extreme struggle, because culturally organizations are very different. If you work for an Indian company and you go for an international company or a multinational company, the culture is very different. It cannot be explained over books, in my view, okay? Because the way you have to adjust, okay, your colleagues are, fellow colleagues will be from an IIM or an IIT, okay, but you will be going from a tier 2 college. You still have to compete, right? So it is like a constant struggle to keep your presence felt. But then there also, in Citibank, now I've completed almost 15 years in Citi. I have worked in various units within Citi. It's a struggle. But the question, you need to have an objective on what you want to do, right? So my example was that I always wanted to be in a bank. So for every of you, you have to sit and think about it. I mean, when I say sit and think about it, no harm in sitting for like 3 hours in a room, lock inside yourself. Okay, think about what you want to do, right? There are different industries available. At least in 1999, imagine when we all got out of college, we didn't have internet. Internet was not so prevalent, right? So we had to go and check books. Even though internet was there, I know how slow it was. The information was not such in abundance, right? So I would urge that understand each industry. There are several industries, right? Today, a pharma, a chemical, or automobiles. Okay, the new age technology companies which are talking about blockchain, artificial intelligence. Okay, banking. Okay, investment banking. So all of these things, just understand. Take some time as you are doing your courses. It can take like good 2 months, 3 months, but understand each industry, the pros and cons. Talk to some of those professionals who are working in this industry. That effort needs to be taken. And in fact, now turning back after 20 years, I believe the guest lectures are meant to be that, right? Because you get people from different industries, you talk to them, develop. I already saw a few LinkedIn requests coming from the college. Okay, so that's a way to go. You have to just keep in touch with some of the people, and then wherever you think you will be able to do a little better or something which is of your liking, you should just pick up that industry. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
So moving on, retail banking and corporate banking, though appear inherently same to the general public, it is not so. They are significantly different in nature. So, can you brief us on what is corporate banking and how has it evolved over the years from when you started your career?
First thing, retail banking and corporate banking are very different. Okay, many banks. Okay, the retail bank and corporate bank are two different organizations inside. Okay, we don't talk to each other. Retail bank is a different animal. Corporate bank is a different animal. In general, what happens is corporate banking people will think that a small shop or for example, a small enterprise, okay, which banks in a branch near your household, okay, that also will come under corporate bank. No. Okay, corporate bank is extremely different. Okay, it's completely diagonally opposite, rather, I'll put it that way. So if I have to look at corporate bank, some of the clients will be your Reliance, your Tata, your Wipros, okay, or your global companies like your Ford or an Apple or an IBM or a HP. Okay, these are the guys who will come under the corporate banking ambit. The retail banking will be individuals like you and me banking with the bank branch, the mom and pop stores which are there near our household. Okay, they will have some credit facilities and they will be banking with them. So all of those things will come under the retail banking. Typically, if you have to understand, if I have to put a number to it, any company with a turnover of say roughly 10,000 crore or plus, okay, that potentially can come under corporate bank. But by and large, anything less has to come under the retail bank. That's the generic, okay, terminology which we use. Banking, okay, lot of us are pretty much associated with the retail bank. Corporate bank, I don't think many of us are associated with, at least college pass outs. Okay, for you, banking will all mean a bank branch and the retail banking activity. So retail banking activity will include opening a savings account or a fixed deposit or a current account or whatever. Okay, mutual funds, all the third party products which they sell. All of these things will come under the retail banking. In the corporate bank, what people do, we extend a lot of credit. Okay, we will extend 1,000 crores of loans to somebody, 5,000 crores of loans to somebody. There'll be a lot of cross-border activities. Okay, if somebody has to import, okay, what are the regulations associated with it? Can I import something from Sudan? No, I can't. Okay, because those are sanctioned countries. Okay, when do I need to make a payment for a machinery which I import? There are regulations associated with it. Exports, there are various regulations associated with it. Now, if I export something and the money is going to come after 1 year, dollar is today at 75, 76, whatever it is. Tomorrow, 6 months later, when I have to make the payment, what if dollar goes to 90? Right? $100 million, okay, into 15 rupees of difference, that is 75 to 90. I am running a huge risk. So we need to protect those clients from those kind of currency risk. We will also support clients from commodity risk. For example, I import copper, right? Copper, a ton costs, whatever, X. So maybe 3 months later, I have to pay. If the market prices moves against the client, then there is going to be a huge loss on his P&L. So activities like this will come under the corporate bank. An investment bank also is a coexisting term with corporate bank, essentially, which will support a lot of advisory services. All of you guys would have seen what a Facebook and a Geo platform today is trying to do, right? Facebook is investing almost 10% stake in Reliance today, right? So those kind of activities all will come under the corporate bank. Corporate bank in general is not very familiar to the common public, but inside a bank, that's a large growth engine or a very important piece of banking for any bank for that matter.
Yes, sir. So thank you for enlightening us on corporate banking arena. The services and products offered to retail customers would then be completely different from that of the services and products offered to the corporate banking arena.
Absolutely.
Sir, can you briefly highlight us on the key services and products offered to corporate clients in general?
As I just mentioned to you, a trade finance, Hema was just touching upon, okay, a trade finance, for example. What does a trade finance mean? I can give you a quick example on a trade finance, okay. Let me take an example of, say, some name, like a random name, like a Hyundai, okay. A Hyundai Motors has to import like steel, okay, from, say, Korea, $100 million, okay, every month. Now today, rupees at 75, okay. Now what I will do is, I will do a trade finance, okay, which is connected to the USD LIBOR, okay. I will tell you why also. Let us take an example of an Indian company. For example, Reliance imports plastics from somewhere, right? And another company in China or a US is also importing plastic, okay. Let us assume that they are all importing from Vietnam. The interest rates in US could be 1%. The interest rate in China could be 3%. The interest rate in India could be 7%, right? So if all of us pay 7, 3, and 1% and import the same goods, who will be competitive? The guy who's paying the least interest. So US will always be competitive, right? So then we all have to benchmark ourselves to a common interest rate and start lending, right? So what we will typically do, okay, we will all benchmark ourselves to the USD LIBOR. Okay, all of us will lend against USD LIBOR. So for an import, I will say $100 million, I will make a payment directly to the Vietnamese supplier, and the Indian customer can pay me after 3 months, right? So I have to be extremely clear on the risk I take, because it is not just that I've given him $100 million. It is a currency risk which I'm undertaking, right? $100 million today could be what, 700 crore. 2 days later or 3 days later, it can go to 800 crores. Will the client pay me 800 crores for me making a payment of 700 crore? He will not. So I have to ensure that he hedges those risks. I have to give a solutioning to that. I need to know the regulation on how I need to make a payment. What are the underlying documents I need to submit to the Reserve Bank of India while making this $100 million of payment? There are various other regulatory requirements which I may have to do. So those are the things which we may have to do. So credit facilities, loans is one of the key products which we will do. We will also do structures like trade finance. We will also do hedging solutions like currency, commodities, and all of that. Cash management is a very big piece in corporate bank, right? Assuming that a Coke has presence in a country like India, nook and corner of the country, okay, a Nestle or a P&G, how do they collect these cash, right? It is not a simple task, okay? A mom and pop store, because for example, if you go to a remote part of, say, let's take Karnataka, you go to a Davangere, okay? Somebody wants to buy a kilogram of rice. What do? They don't have access to credit cards or whatsoever. They will go and pay cash to the retailer there. The retailer will in turn put it to the bank, or he will still go and pay the wholesaler in cash. But end of the day, HLL has to get the money, right, from every parts of the country. So we need to provide certain customization on how, without any fraud, okay, you get all the collections into their account at the right time, okay, without any wastage of time. So these are some of the products which we will continuously keep offering, okay, for various corporate clients, depending on the industries they operate.
Yes.
So, making a pitch to the corporates is considered more difficult than that to the retail customers. Can you share with us your experience on the same?
It is difficult because a retail customer, for example, if I go and ask for a housing loan, somebody offers me, let's say, 8%. Another bank comes and says, I will offer you at 7.75%. Okay, it's a no-brainer. You will go to the guy who offers the cheapest rate, right? So it's more a commercial play as far as retail banking is concerned. The stickiness is not much. I'm sure all of us have bank accounts. And do you know the bank manager? Do you know a personal banker? No way. Okay, all of us go to the internet bank. Okay, find whatever we need to do, we will do it on an online platform. That's how things evolved in the retail bank. In a corporate bank scenario, it doesn't work that way. For example, if I offer somebody a $500 million of or 1,000 crore of credit limits to them, then it is more a trust, right? You have to build that trust, because I'm offering a lot of credit facility to that customer based on his business performance, the promoter's integrity, the industry cycle, and all of that. So unless the trust is there, okay, tomorrow, for example, an auto sector goes under a deep recessionary cycle, okay, I need to still understand the client's issues, I need to still continue with the credit facility without ensuring that there is no non-performing assets which gets created in the bank. And at the same time, the client needs to know that the bank has this NPA issue. He may have to report it from a regulatory perspective. So how good can we solve both our problems? So it's more a teamwork, okay, and it comes with a lot of trust. You will see a lot of clients, for example, banking with a bank for 50 years, 60 years. And the 65th year, a fresh college pass out from corporate bank goes and says, I will offer you something. I don't think they're going to just shy away from a relationship which they have nurtured for 60, 65 years and just move the banking relationship. So it is much more based on trust, okay, and constant engagement. That's how corporate bank business will
go. So, IT has changed the way banking services are provided over the years. But we also believe that corporate banking is mainly built on personal relationships. There exist contradictions in these statements when addressed. Can you brief us to clear this dilemma?
It has to coexist, okay? When we talk about IT, the digitization as thieves, etc., these are only to support customers have a banking experience seamless. That has nothing to do with the trust which you build, etc. Trust is basically based on the way you interact, the way you talk, the kind of perspective which you provide to them, okay, giving them the right solutioning, giving them the right suggestions, talking about how the industry is evolving. Because if I'm going to a Hyundai, I will also cover a Ford, I will also cover a Maruti, I will also cover a Volkswagen, I will also cover a Daimler. So I keep talking to all of them. So I will give a different perspective on what other companies are doing. Whereas IT is basically that you want a loan, okay, so you don't have to call me, okay, so just go on a digital platform, you just click a few buttons and your loan is done, right? If you want to take a DD, just take a DD online. All of these solutions are already available. All my research reports, okay, I will publish it in a common portal. You can just go pick it up yourself, right? Things like that. So IT and digitization will continue to happen, but the front-end relationship officers, okay, for corporate bank, that I don't think is under any sort of threat in the near future.
Sir, consolidation of the banks, which we are observing in the current era, can be looked into with different lenses. What would be your opinion on the same? Has it been beneficial or not?
Repeat the question.
Yes, I will.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Consolidation of the banks, which we are observing in the current era, can be looked into with different lenses. What would be your opinion on the same? Has it been beneficial or not?
It's been a long drawn discussion, okay, in India. I don't know how many of you have observed from April 1st, a lot of nationalized banks have got converged, and there are like 4 nationalized banks today. In the busy scheme of things, or under the lockdown, we have not gone. The Vijaya Bank has changed its name. Allahabad Bank has changed its name. Okay, so everything is coming under 4 large brands. The essential thought process behind this was to have a proper control. Okay, because there were too many banks. A lot of them were regional, right? Kerala, for example, had its own State Bank of Travancore and whatnot. Tamil Nadu has Indian Bank and Indian Overseas Bank. Karnataka has Vijaya Bank. Then you have Bank of Maharashtra. Okay, so these are regionally focused bank, and they have grown over a period of time, or they were all privately owned, eventually nationalized, okay, over a period of time. But their focus was their specific region. This was largely community driven and all of that. Maybe the central government at some stage wanted to converge everything together. And I mean, eventually, see, there is a monetary mechanism also. I don't know whether I can get deeper into it. End of the day, all of us read in the newspapers, right? The interest rates have gone down, the repo rates have been reduced, the reverse repo has got reduced. Eventually, does that reflect in your housing loan rate or a personal loan rate? No, nothing happens. Okay, all of these is like at a macro level, things change, but does it percolate to the retail customers? No, it does not. So how do you do that? Okay, so you have to keep smaller number of banks to monitor. Otherwise, we had like 120 banks or something. So it is extremely difficult for the government also to just manage all of this. So they have just converged everything into 4. But still, there are these old private sector banks, okay, continuing to exist. You are, I don't know which are the old private sector banks. I can think of the Ratnakar Bank or the Karur Vysya banks or the Lakshmi Vilas banks and all of that. I don't know, there will be some change which will happen there also. How is it going to impact students like you? I don't think nationalized banks were really hiring MBAs. Okay, so they had a very different approach. Okay, in terms of the probationary officer exams and all of that. Private banks, there is absolutely no change. Foreign banks, there are absolutely no change. So from a career perspective, I don't think it is going to impact MBA students much. It is just that we are trying to create large banks, okay, which can compete in terms of balance sheet size with several other banks across the globe. The top 10 banks in the world are like 6 or 7 could be Chinese banks. Over a period of time, they've all grown. Where will India be? Maybe we'll be at the largest bank in India could be the top 60th or 70th in India. I'm not very sure. So we need to consolidate. We need to have a level playing field with some of the global banks. And that's the intent. So from a career perspective, this move of consolidation is not going to impact at least MBA students like.
My next question is, the problem of NPAs that we hear more often tends to happen due to various reasons. How would you choose those clients? Do you use some financial metrics or business analytic tools to make these critical decisions?
That's the job, right? So anybody comes and asks for a loan, right? You have to do a lot of thinking before offering anything to them. End of the day, right? Banking is one. Okay, you can do whatever analysis you want under the world. Okay, under the sun, you can do anything. End of the day, we are not astrologers, right? In the media, people will blame that banks have so much of NPA and all of that. As a banker, I feel pity for myself, right? A corona issue a COVID situation, right? All the companies are like now stuck. Now, regulatorily, if somebody does not pay me 90 days, I have to declare him as an NPA. Now, the central bank has said, okay, offer moratorium for 90 more days. Great. Okay, extend it by another 90 more days. Great. But after 180 days, the reality will sink in. Correct? I have to still collect. Okay. I have to. Sometimes people will think bankers are heartless. Okay.
Yes.
But it is a job. End of the day, if nothing is collected, what happens to the deposits which you guys have placed in the bank? The bank is supposed to return the deposits with certain interest rates, right? 10%, 8%, whatever it is. So it is a vicious cycle. We need to understand the full perspective of banking. We do a lot of analysis, okay? A lot of analysis that sometimes we will be vexed that why do we need to think so much, right? What if this happens? What if that happens? You believe there'll be like 50, 55 parameters before taking a loan decision. And some banks may have even more. There is a lot of work, okay? There is a big unit which does only this job, okay? But after all of that, why there is an NPA, I really don't have an answer. It could be a function of so many different things. I don't know how many guys of you have seen the pagers before the mobile phones came. There used to be something called a pager. That's a business risk, right? Pager is something between the landline phone and a mobile phone. You'll have an instrument, so the message will get delivered that please call me or something, then you have to call them back. This model was in existence for what, 2 years or something, I guess, right? There are a lot of such things, yeah. Even camera, okay, it is no longer in existence, right? So we need to think through so many things on whether these things will exist in the next 10 years, 15 years, okay? A car, okay, internal combustion engine model is slowly progressing towards an electric model right now, right? I don't know how many of you have seen, there is a Government of India mission statement that by 2030, India will no longer produce internal combustion engine cars. Everything has to be on an electric platform. Now, great, okay, this is the future. Can you believe that and go? Okay, if I go to Korea, for example, those guys have moved to hydrogen, right? So they have moved beyond electric. Now, which is a sustainable model? We don't know. Now, NPA will be a function of all of this, right? So tomorrow, electric, I fund a large sum, okay, and then 5 years later, this electric hydrogen thing comes and everybody goes to hydrogen. As a banker, I am stuck in this proposition. So there's indeed a lot of analysis which goes through, okay, to understand what happens in each industries across the globe. We travel a lot to understand how things are, okay, and then we come back, we talk about it, okay, we go and ask our own customer that this guy in Korea or a Taiwan is talking about hydrogen, why don't you do it? Then he will have his own perspective. So you can interpret it in any way. So end of the day, what do we do? Ability and intention is what you can ascertain, nothing else, right? If the guy has ability to pay, I will look at his balance sheet and take the call. Does he have intention? I don't know. At that point of time, he may have all the intentions to pay, but eventually things can change, right? So these are the two parameters which we look at, but there are several other parameters which are.
Moving on, sir. International banking services cannot be offered as standardized products to all the clients. There exists customization which has to be built based on the needs of every corporate client. Can you tell us, sir, how challenging it is in this regard?
The services are one and the same end of the day. Okay, international banking or even if I do it for a local company, both are one and the same. I can actually flip the question that people who have global transactions, for example, imports, exports, okay, all of them versus somebody who has only domestic transactions, which does business within the Indian subcontinent, their requirements itself will be very different, right? Because if I have to make a payment to US, the regulations are very different, right? If I have to obtain a payment from Japan, the regulations are very different, okay? The banking channel, okay? So you can't, if I make a payment from say Singapore to India, does the money get reflected in your bank account immediately? No, there is a channel which comes through. So the product offering requirement is very different, okay, rather than what we offer. So it stems from the customer's requirement only on the services which we offer between international banking services and the domestic banking services.
Sir, team management seems to be the most important trait in the corporate banking space today. Over 2 decades, you have handled several teams and mentored them to give their best at important times. Can you narrate to us how you did it and what youngsters like us should be able to learn in the beginning of our career?
It is not, team management is not just for corporate bank, okay? Any organization, any unit, okay? Even in a college like yours, in a classroom of yours, okay? Team management is extremely important. Even at a family level, team management is very important, right? There will be conflicts as long as human beings are there around, okay? There will be conflicts for sure. But we need to understand that everybody has to coexist end of the day, right? So it is an extremely important trait, okay? Like anything else, you have to be passionate, you have to be disciplined, you have to keep learning, okay? There are several advices which we all keep getting every day. But team management, I mean, you would have all seen in a lot of these social media pages about being a boss and being a leader and all of that, right? So it stems from that, right? You need to inspire a lot of respect if you're a team leader, okay? How do you do that? Just help them grow, end of the day, okay? Help your team grow, okay? There is nothing wrong. But I firmly believe that the moment you help people grow, you will eventually grow, right? It sounds like a very cliched statement, but genuinely I believe in that, right? So you just see your team grow, okay? You will inspire a lot of respect, they will grow. In the process, as a team leader, you will also grow. You need to keep constantly learning a lot of things, okay? Inspiring confidence, okay? Don't let your team down, okay? So just be with them. Ensure that they don't do any mistakes, okay? Even if they do a mistake, okay? Just stand by them, okay? Except for issues like disciplinary, okay? Something which is not right, okay? All of those things have to be kept aside. But otherwise, as much as possible, you have to command that respect, okay? And that commanding of respect will come by your own self-development, right? So that has to be a constant process. So it starts from self, okay, before coming into the team management aspect.
Sir, in your experience, how challenging is the future space in international banking going to be, given that everyone will be doing most businesses online?
Doing business online is not going to really hamper international banking growth, because that will in fact propel the growth for international banking. But banking is going to be very different, okay? Like any other industry, okay, there is going to be a lot of disruption in banking also. And I think the pace at which the change is going to happen is going to be much more faster. In the next 5 years, we will see a lot of changes in banking also. I don't know how many of you are reading enough. There are things about open banking. I think some of you should just start reading about open banking and all of that. All of you will have a GPay tool today. right? A GPay or a WhatsApp Pay, or we've got so familiar to it. So how many of you really think about, when I make a payment through a GPay, do I go into the internet banking side of the bank? No, right? You don't have to. So why does the bank need to build an internet banking platform when a GPay or a WhatsApp Pay or whatever, okay, a phone pay can do? Because you don't need the internet banking side of a bank, right? So things like that are constantly evolving, and it is going to outpace a lot of things. I don't know, there's something called P2P lending, which is evolving slowly. P2P lending is essentially nothing but, I have a lot of cash, okay? Now I can buy shares, I can buy gold, I can buy land, I can buy real estate, I can place a bank deposit, I can put it in mutual fund. These are the asset classes I have, okay? But today, RBI is saying, if you have cash, okay, I can lend directly to HEMA, okay, under a legitimate framework. I don't have to depend on a bank who will analyze what HEMA is up to and then give a loan to HEMA. And then somebody was asking about an NPA, right? If the money doesn't come, what the bank is going to do? So RBI is saying now you yourself can assess somebody and start lending to them under a framework. They have put a regulatory framework also to it. So lot of changes are happening. Okay, I see a lot of changes already happening in Chinese banking sector. Okay, you'd be very surprised that India is one of the most advanced banking countries in the world. Okay, we are far ahead in terms of US. I would proudly say that. Okay, the UPI mechanism which we have put in the country, all the GPay and phone pays and all of that, which is owned by an organization called NPCI, the National Payment Corporation of India. After so many years of independence, I'm seeing like monetary authorities of Singapore coming and asking us, how did you guys put this platform? Can you emulate this in Singapore? Can we do a cross-border UPI transaction? Can I send SGD, okay, to somebody on in Singapore through a GPay platform? Okay, things like that. Okay, and the Aadhaar mechanism, which we have come back, I mean, like 5 years back, or we have almost 98% of the Indian population as Aadhaar. It's a biometric identification, right?
Yes.
I don't think many countries have such mechanism in place, right? So your direct fund transfer, I know how many of you have heard about Jan Dhan accounts. Basically, if you have an Aadhaar, okay, just walk into a bank branch and just tell them that you don't have to provide any ID proof. Your bank account gets open, they give you a debit card, whatever, and direct fund transfer happens. Any government schemes which the guy is eligible for, okay, the central government directly transfers the funds into these accounts. If I'm correct, 3 years back, the balances in these accounts are roughly around 35,000 crores, right? So it's a huge sum over a period of time. So lot of changes are happening in banking, okay, and it happens in any other industry. It is extremely important for you guys to just keep pace with it. We struggle as banking professionals, but it is going to be even more a struggle unless you are connected to the people in the industry.
Sir, Citibank is a US-based company, and several billion-dollar package was announced by the US Federal Treasury recently. This step would have huge strain on the functioning of the US banks. How do you think this will have impact on the company in the short and long run?
I can't comment on the bank on how it is going to impact, but all that I can say is that a COVID kind of situation, okay, several monetary authorities react in very different ways. Okay, Japan will have its own mechanism to do things. We have announced a huge package, but did we transfer anything to the pocket of the people who are struggling? We didn't. Okay, but we took a different route. We wanted to just incentivize the industries and do. The US government decided to just fund those banks. Okay, and there also there is direct fund transfer which happens. But this is something which worked very well for US after the 2008 crisis. So they are trying to adopt the same policies around this time too. I don't know how many of you have observed that 2008 when the crisis, the financial crisis happened, the US government started issuing or buying these bonds issued by various banks. And in a month, like for example, all the US banks collectively issue, say for example, $100 billion of bonds. The US government will go and buy. Okay, simply no questions asked. They will just go and buy. And these banks will get that hundreds of billions of dollars and they will start lending. Because they don't have any other way but to lend. They will say that don't park it with the Central Bank of US, okay, the Fed, but you have to continue lending. That was the only thing which they put. So India also can do that, but India is trying to do a mix of various things. They are incentivizing the banks a bit. They are incentivizing various industries a bit. There is a guarantee program which is coming in for all the MSMEs. Okay, because our challenges in India is very different. Okay, so you can't compare what the US has done with what India has done. But as long as US is concerned, they have just used the same tool which worked very well for them on what happened post the financial crisis in 2000. Same methodology is continuing.
Sir, US economy is predominantly based on mortgages. Now, due to the current pandemic, the mortgages have stopped. And how do you think this would affect the banking operations?
I don't know. It is not dependent on mortgage per se. Okay, maybe where we are getting that feeling is that in 2008, crisis was basically because of the mortgage issues, the delinquencies which came out of subprime mortgage loans. Okay, so that is where the issue started. I don't think US as a country is completely dependent on mortgages. If that is the case, then all of us will have housing loans. Okay, even in a country like India. It is certainly not a mortgage linked economy. Okay, in my opinion, India will be much more mortgage linked because our real estate prices are sometimes crazy. This crisis, I think some of these countries will come out pretty strong, is my view. Okay, because if you see the kind of expansions which some of the US companies are now talking about, Facebook investing like what $7 billion in India. Okay, and I saw something HP is trying to set up a plant in India. Apple manufacturing has started in India last year. I don't know how many of you noticed that. I think somewhere in Kolar, near Karnataka. Okay, in Karnataka there is an Apple plant which is being constructed by a company called Wistron, which manufactures all the low-end phones. Now Chennai has another Apple plant. Okay, so that manufactures all the high-end phones. Okay, so slowly US companies will start expanding into different markets, and I sincerely hope that India becomes the biggest beneficiary of it, because 6 months back when the whole US-China trade war and all of that was happening, the biggest beneficiary was end of the day Malaysia and Vietnam. So India lost the bus around that. But now maybe it's time that we really up our antenna and grab much of this business from US into India.
Sir, with the announcement of the 20 lakh crore package by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, how has it impacted the activities inside the banking sector dealing with clients belonging to MSMEs?
We are still understanding what this package is. Okay, it is going to take some time. It sounds like a very massive package where the government is co-guaranteeing a lot of loans which we take. What it essentially means that if I give you 100 rupees of loan, the government is saying I will give you a guarantee of 2025. If you default, okay, the government is saying I will step in and pay the money. Okay, but to what extent? I will pay like up to 20-25 rupees. What about the balance? 75 is still my credit exposure, right? I have to still take a call. But is it a better credit? Okay, tomorrow, even if I give 100 my 25 rupees back from the government, the balance 75 is what I'm taking credit. So that's the way it needs to be looked at. But it has several subcomponents and fine prints. Okay, so we may have to like look into it much more deeply, and each bank will come with its own policy, I guess, at some point of time.
So, especially for the final year finance specialization students, amidst and after this lockdown period, there exists quite a few challenges in making career choices. Can you please talk to us about that?
We in fact talk about it in our office environments that it is a very tough time, okay, for all those who are passing out around this time. But it is tough, okay, there is absolutely no doubt. But are you alone? No, because the whole world is going under a crisis. Okay, we need to think from that perspective. I know all of you will be very nervous that, okay, I'm in the final year, things are not really the way it needs to be. Because last November or December, okay, if I walk through the streets of Bangalore, okay, it was such a vibrant environment from a business perspective. Okay, everything was growing and all of that. Same thing happened in 1999, okay, when we finished college. Okay, so there was a Y2K issue which was going on. Okay, none of us were certain on what is going to happen. Again, in 2008, it happened. Okay, that batch had to go through the same set of problems, and you guys have a different set of problems, COVID and all of that. One thing, be mindful of, okay, continue to read a lot more. continue to gain perspectives, okay, use your time, okay, to the maximum possible. It is tough to say that, but you don't have the choice, right? Can you go out to a restaurant today? You can't. Can you go out and play? No, you can't, right? So everybody is stuck. Might as well use this time much more productively. Personal view of mine is that the recovery now is going to be V-shaped, in the sense the economy has shrunk so much that now if everything opens up one fine morning, okay, the recovery has to be V. It cannot be like going like a L or whatever. It can't be, okay. It has to suddenly grow. If you are growing at 5%, next quarter you go at 5.2, 5.3. That's how we were growing. But now suddenly you go into a zero or a minus and everything opens up. It has to grow in a V-shaped recovery, right? So you have to capitalize on that. It is very easy to sit here and give all this global gyan, but continue to read, continue to get perspectives of different industries, stay connected with a lot of people in the industry. That is going to really help. Okay, I can see still there is demand for banking professionals. Okay, we are not getting the right talent. Okay, we struggle to get the right talent. Even around this time, I have had some resignations and new joinees coming in. Okay, all of that is happening. I wonder around this time how people even get a job, but that still seems to happen. Okay, I have like 5 or 6 who have got a job. Okay, all of India. So they are moving, and there are. I am also waiting to replace all of them, but that's going to take its own time because I need to get a headcount approval. Now I will also try and see whether can I prove my headcount at this point of time. Why do I need to hire somebody fresh now? Because I can contain my cost or whatsoever. It's a mix and match of all of it, but be very positive. That's all I can say. You're not alone. All of us have had the same problem. 1999, Y2K, 2008 financial crisis. Now it is COVID. 1991, there was economy opening up. Okay, 1991. So every 8-9 years, something or other keeps happening. So it is nothing unique. Okay, things will move on. Okay, be positive and just continue to keep learning. That's all.
Sir, employees nowadays have a tendency to change their jobs very often, especially in the banking arena. Is it more often seen? How would you approach the situation personally, and what would be your advice to all the fresh graduates who would like to start their journey in the banking sector?
It's a great question actually, because managing the millennials, okay, the people who are born after like 95, 96 is extremely different. The way they think is very different. But at the end of the day, everything has to, it depends on what the people want to do, right? I have been in just 2 jobs, right? I've stayed in city for 15 years. There'll be a lot of juniors, okay, college fresh pass outs, okay, who will just join, stay there for around 2-3 years, and then they will move on to another job. 3 years there, they will move on to another job. I still be in touch with them. They've all grown in careers. But it is just that what they want to do is what they're doing, correct? And I'm doing what I want to do. It is my perspective. I mean, it's a very tough answer to give. Okay, what is right and what is wrong, nobody knows. It's your individual perspective. If you want longevity in your career, I would ask you to at least sustain in any given organization for at least 4 or 5 years. Okay, a 1-2 year jumping here and there is not going to really help. You wouldn't learn. The organization will not benefit out of you. The organization will forget you, rather. So pick the right organization. Okay, continue with them. Okay, the moment you feel that there is not much of growth opportunity for you, at that point you need to take a call that you need to move. Okay, you should not be moving just for the sake of moving, that I'm getting 10% more salary, so therefore I'm moving into another job. I don't think that is going to help anyone in the long run. Okay, get the right roles. Okay, if you believe that there is going to be continuing growth within an organization, you should continue there. The day you feel that there is no longer an opportunity to grow in this organization, that is when you should move. That can happen in 1 year, that can happen in 5 years, that can happen in 10 years. Now for me, it is 15 years. Okay, I still believe that there is some scope for me to grow. I'm just continuing to be in city, right? So that's the way I would answer to this question.
So, after the lockdown, there has been a survey that there might be increase in employment, but rather decrease in the payment for the employees. How is this seen in the view of the development of the nation? And how long could it probably take to stabilize the income of an average employee?
See, it's a double whammy, okay? In the sense, if the first aspect of your question was that after this COVID issue, there is going to be a lot of employment generation which will happen. And the second aspect is that the salaries may not be as good as it used to be. If there is going to be immense employment generation which happens, right? So then the demand for the right talent will always continue to be there. So if you develop your skill sets, okay, if you show the right passion, okay, if you show the urge to learn things, okay, if you have that smartness, the street smartness, okay, in getting things done, okay, with the employment generation which we're talking about, salaries will not be a challenge, okay. 6 months back, I've never heard about salaries being cut, etc. But around this time, we hear about it a lot, okay, unfortunately. But that's a function of the present business environment. And this business environments will keep coming and going. It's a question of another 2-3 months, I guess, right? Because we were all so scared in early March. Now we have all started to just accept what COVID is. Okay, we are trying to coexist with it. There are a lot of memes which I keep reading about COVID issues. Okay, I'm talking to people in Bombay, Delhi. Okay, pretty much. Have you all got affected in any way? I don't know, except for the fact that we couldn't go to a restaurant and we couldn't do an international holiday or domestic holiday, and maybe you didn't go to office. Everything else is BAU. Okay, sometimes we also make it very dramatic that certain things have to happen the way it has always happened, right? So let's not. I mean, I'll rather say that we have just dramatized it too much. All of us are at home. We can continue doing what we are doing. Right? You can continue reading. You can continue understanding different things. Okay, you can continue interacting with people. All of that will continue. Right? So I don't see that this is going to really impact salaries or whatsoever. It's a very short-term effect.
Sir, my next question is, what is the role of artificial intelligence in private and public sector banks?
Okay, first we need to understand what artificial intelligence is. Okay, as much as I also like know about that much of like how you guys will know, right? Maybe I will know a little bit better. Nothing but automating a lot of process. Okay, like for example, if I have to put a very simple thing, like if somebody comes and asks for a DD, okay, now earlier I used to just take a printer, okay, print it, issue it, sign it, give it, all of that. Now under an artificial intelligence scenario, maybe all of these processes will get automated. Okay, so there is some amount of we call it as RPAs, okay, the robotic process automation. Okay, so there are several processes in a BPO or a KPO which can be automated without much of human intervention. So in banking also, we do a lot of such stuff. Okay, if we don't do it, we are not going to be competitive over a period of time. Is it going to cut down a lot of these jobs? Okay, yes, of course. Okay, it will cut down a lot of these mundane jobs. Okay, but if you become a professional in such things like a big data or an analytics or an artificial intelligence, the job opportunities will be much more larger there. Right? It is as simple as this, right? Swiggy, when it came in, okay, has it been a threat to any business? No, it has just propelled the growth of several restaurants. So artificial intelligence will help grow banking. Okay, it will help grow talent. Okay, so if you are learning artificial intelligence or some of these new age technologies, on a long run, it is going to benefit. It will cut down job, but only the mundane jobs. But if you right away get into those technologies, then the prospect of job opportunities is immense in those sectors.
Sir, do you think if certain banks were to go bankrupt, would the central government give them a bailout? If so, why do they deserve it?
See, there is something called a financial system in the country, right? That can start from your pawnbrokers, it can go to your banks, it can go to your non-banking finance company. It is about a mutual fund, the insurance companies, the stock markets. All of this put together is the financial system of the country. Inherently, okay, we have all thought that banking is the most safest place to put your money in, right? Knowingly or unknowingly. We have not heard much of banks going bankrupt and you losing money because you placed money in the bank. So it is to just ensure that that trust continues in the banking system. And two important aspects which you need to understand. Okay, why do they deserve it? Okay, why do they deserve it? I will have to put it this way. I don't know. You have macroeconomics as part of your curriculum. I'm sure as part of MBA, all of you will be reading macroeconomics, right? What happens? Inflation. We talk about inflation, right? If inflation goes very high, the politicians get very nervous that onion prices have gone up so much, the rice prices have gone up so much. So how do you reduce the price? Can you go and tell a trader that, yeah, reduce the price from 50 rupees to 45 rupees? You can't do that. Okay, it is not possible for the government to do it. So the banking system comes in play. What do? Now you increase your interest rates. Okay, which means a guy who typically comes and takes a housing loan. Okay, if I'm charging 10% today, maybe I'll take a housing loan. Tomorrow the RBI says, okay, you increase the interest rate to 20%. A lot of people who are planning to take a housing loan will never take a housing loan. What does it mean? The guys who are supplying cement, the guys who are supplying steel, the guys who are constructing these houses, the laborers, okay, all the whole chain is going to get impacted, right? So banking is an inherent, okay, entity for any of the banking, for the government, okay, to monitor inflation and all of that. So if you just allow a bank to collapse, okay, imagine what is going to happen, right? So the monetary mechanism, okay, is something which the government manages only through the banking system. This is not very unique to India. Globally, monetary policies are action through the banks. And so banks, even though we are a private organization, okay, we need to understand that we are still regulated by the government, okay. We all come under the Reserve Bank of India, and we need to comply with all of these regulations. So from that perspective, it is more to keep the trust and ensure that the monetary transmission happens at the right stage. Otherwise, government cannot control inflation or even some of these monetary measures and interest rates, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Parameshwaran. We had a wonderful interaction with you and amazing answers. I think I could see a good teacher in you, Mr. Parameshwaran.
Okay.
Enlighten our students. Very nicely explained. Thank you very much. In the midst of your busy schedule, you have given us slot and then addressed our students and other.
Thank you. I was a bit nervous, but I hope I answered it properly. Okay. So
properly you have answered. We enjoyed thoroughly the sessions very well. Thank you, Parameshwaran. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hema. Thanks, Shrishti. Thanks, Stevie. Thank you all. All the best.
Thank you, audience.